Yeah.
Take it away.
All right. So first of all, team, thanks for everyone for joining the call. A couple of quick housekeeping items. So all attendees will remain in listen-only mode for the duration of this webinar. If you do have any questions during the presentation, please submit them via chat. And in the interest of time, we won't be answering all the questions today, but we'll certainly respond after the presentation, share some Q&A with the full audience. So welcome, Tony. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, David.
All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about core deflection and specifically how IVR plays into that. And obviously on the top of everyone's mind right now are cost savings. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you achieve the nirvana of cost savings and improve customer service, and is it possible? So I'm David. Nice to meet you all. I head up the Americas business here in Whisper. And Tony, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tony, based out of Brisbane, Australia, up in sunny Queensland. I've been with the Whisper crew for about 3.5 years now. Been in mobility for about 20.
Perfect. Great. Good cross-cultural collaboration going on here. Perfect. We have a lot to get through in the agenda, but don't worry, we'll get through it pretty quickly. We'll talk a little bit about the environment, and then really we'll get into a few use cases with Tony, where we'll be talking about how we've applied each of these concepts to those use cases. So let's go ahead and talk first of all about the current state of the environment around customer service. So a few facts and figures on here. It's clear that customer service is key. It's clear that there's a big push from consumers to be able to improve customer service and company support. And it's very important to customers. 95% of consumers believe, they have a significant amount of brand loyalty when it comes to good customer service. And this is obviously a challenge for a lot of companies with limited budgets, some instances declining budgets. How do they keep this customer service at the level it needs to be? And how do they make sure that customers stay happy in this environment? So we're going to talk a little bit about core deflections. I'm going to ask Tony, when someone says core deflection or a client says core deflection, what comes into your mind? What's your perspective, your definition of that?
David, I think when anyone's calling in to a company, a local council or a government agency, they've got an inquiry, and a call deflection is the ability for that company to manage that customer inquiry without the person calling in even hitting an agent. So that transaction may be partially processed, or it could, in some instances, be fully processed.
Excellent. And in your experience, what kind of examples have you implemented, Tony, when people have put in core deflections for what kind of inquiries?
Well, the inquiries vary. I suppose the customer situation where customers would come to us to make this inquiry would be where they've reached capacity. And certainly during COVID, we were in a state of heightened status requesting. So we'd be calling into companies quite a lot. The call queues would be stretched to their limits. So companies were speaking to us at that time around the ability to capture and manage more calls because there were significant spikes, with making every attempt not to either increase infrastructure or personnel. And since we've done that during COVID, David, we've found that a lot of companies have kept these practices in place because it's such a simple, easy lifting way to process calls in a far more economical and faster way.
Great. Okay. And so you touched on a couple of these benefits of core deflection. So maybe you could give us an example from one of the clients you've worked with around either one of these, whether it's money saved or time saved.
To give you an example, RACQ they take roadside assistance calls. So there are roadside assistants here based out of Queensland. They are the main one in Queensland. They've been around for a long time, have a very strong, loyal customer base, and they're a very recognized brand. So when you go back to that 95% stat, they certainly fall into that capacity, in that range. So RACQ have peaks and troughs when they're managing roadside assistance inquiries that would be based on time of the day or the weather. And they wanted the ability to take off that top peak of calls, or take a certain percentage of the calls out of the queue. So brand loyalty is a very big thing for them. They want their roadside members to be serviced appropriately. They want to maintain that good level of service as compared to you speaking to an agent, as an example.
Mhm.
So they implemented a call deflection workflow. So when you do call in for roadside assistance, you don't speak to an agent if you don't want to. You've got the option through their IVR to press a number to then receive a message back to your mobile phone, because 98% of their calls do come from a mobile handset. And it gives you the ability, if you'd like, to make that request via a simple link to a web form that allows you to request that roadside assistance on your mobile handset. So the contact center agents have been freed up to take other calls, and the member has been able to place their inquiry for roadside assistance in the same quick manner. They're at the same status in the queue, and they've received, they've had their request immediately recognized and logged.
Great. And so that means that RACQ can confidently, go forward with the number of call center agents they think they might believe. And if there is a overflow, then it allows them to do that, right?
Well, this has now become part of their standard ecosystem. So it's now standard in their IVR. We're looking at other options and other product streams within our ACQ, but it's just an always there. And there's a certain percentage of calls that every day are managed by that IVR, which means those agents can be redeployed to other activities.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, I think a lot of us would agree as well, just looking at this chart. I know certainly in a non-emergency situation like that, I would be much happier to work through a rich text message rather than wait on hold for any length of time and wait for an agent.
I agree. And I think if you can have your request process in under 2 minutes versus waiting for 10 minutes on the phone, there may be a little hesitancy when you're doing it the first time, but I think as customers become used to that as a channel, the adoption and for them, the adoption's increased substantially because their members find it easy.
And talk to me a little more about how much richer that experience is also from the client's perspective, the amount of data that they can collect versus a phone call. So for example, maybe talk a little bit about photographs or also geolocation, where you can't really obviously get that across in a phone conversation with an agent.
Yeah, well, I think geolocation's a funny one, David, because sometimes people don't know where they are. So with our
happens
platform,
to me a lot. I never know where I am.
Where would we be without our phones these days?
Right.
Quite often people come contacting in, and this isn't necessarily just an RACQ use case. This cuts across a lot of our customers and the verticals that we work with, where an agent may need to ask, 10 or 15 questions, but there's certain features within the platform that allow those processes to be automated. So you mentioned geography or Latin long. We're able to capture somebody's Latin long without them actually knowing it. There's a little bit of variation in the accuracy based on the density of where you are making it from. So if you're in a very regional area, and for those on the call, up here in Queensland, I would say 90%, 95% of Queensland you would call regional. So sometimes where you've got low density, as in, a couple of 100 kilometers between housing, some of the Latin long can get a little bit funny, but when we talk about a majority of the population that live in built up areas, we can capture somebody's Latin long. We can then cross-reference that to what they might say in the phone call, and whatever action we need to take from there, we can. We use this a lot with some work we were doing where people needed to comply to home quarantine with once they had COVID. So when they needed to stay in their house, we could actually do that check, and we cross-reference that with Queensland Transport and Main Roads data to know that David was residing in his property at this particular point in time. So we can get fairly accurate with it.
Okay, and then the photograph side of things, if required, you can obviously you're not going to be able to get that across in a phone conversation.
Yeah, correct. Certainly used a lot in the space of utility. Actually, I should say the use cases for that expanded out a lot as well. So whether you needed to upload, I could send you a text message with a link to a form to fill out. I could probably build the form in less than half an hour. And that would give you the ability to upload a photograph. So that could be of a burst water main, it could be a broken window, a driver's license, a working visa, or even we're doing a lot of rat tests and vaccination certificates as well. And that allows a company to take that image and it would be then registered. We'd send that to wherever it needed to be sent, an S3 bucket or an email inbox, and that can then be flagged with identifiers for Tony Ellison, sent at this time, this location, and here is a photograph or a video.
Perfect. All right. So that all sounds fantastic, Tony, but it's got to be really difficult, right? It's going to take months and months and months. It's going to cost lots of money. How hard is it to get this core deflection integrated into an IVR system?
Well, I can tell you some of our customers have built this IVR workflow in less than a day, actually in half a day.
There you go.
There are dependencies, of course, on what your contact center or your telephony system is in the contact center. So there's a lot of variation to that, David. Also in-house skill sets and that sort of thing. But we work with a number of different contact center telephony platforms, and there'd be a bit of a varying time frame and level of effort. It also depends on what level of integration. We do a lot of API integration in our space. So how do we take that information and repopulate that back to another environment, as an example? But simple out-of-the-box ones you can build and deploy pretty quickly. The Whisper platform is actually a low-code, no-code platform that allows a user provides you a really simple interface, David, where you can simply drag and drop components across to build out templates. You don't even need to be an IT person, and you can punch something out fairly quickly.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. And I think one of the other things maybe to touch on, so you talked a little bit here about how we do it, and just to recap for the audience, I mean, it is as simple as, you call in, hey, press 2 to receive an SMS, you receive an SMS, you click on that rich link, it takes you to what looks like a website. And there are forms then that have been curated, as you mentioned, Tony, by the client that can fill in and has all sorts of functionality around photographs, geo, other things as well. Can you also touch a little bit, because I think one of the interesting elements is the workflow engine within Whisper and escalation paths if required. Can you talk a little bit about how that can get used as well in this scenario?
Yeah, I'll touch a little bit on the curation of the templates that you just made reference to as well, if that's okay. We have a large bank here in Australia, ANZ, and they built out a lot of these templates themselves. They built out over 500 actually, and these templates were built pertaining to the subject matter of what somebody would be calling in for. So if I had to pick an example of we should be decreasing our credit card limit from say $5,000 to $2,500. The team over at ANZ had the contact center agents all have access to a whole range of different templates simply by accessing them via a web browser. And they can send you an SMS after a phone call that's fully branded with, I should say an SMS with one of our links that's all fully branded with ANZ, with all of the details, David, that say, thanks for calling in today on today's date, David. We have decreased, as per your request, your credit card limit from $5,000 to $2,500. If you've got any queries or calls, please click on the link below and you'll be connected with one of our contact center agents. So it's great for the contact center agent because they're able to send a confirmation in a very expeditious way. And some of these contact center agents, they're not IT people, David. They're great at being a contact center agent, but they've got so many environments that they're managing on a call. To simply go to a web browser, pick out a web link that's been pre-saved and fill in about 2 or 3 fields and punch it out means it's quick for them. You've had a great customer experience because you've got there's a lot of disingenuous content out there at the moment. So you've got this authentic message that's personalized to you, fully branded. And of course, we capture that as a record going out to you. So if any data needs to be prosecuted at a later date to confirm that information was sent to you, we have a full record of everything that's transpired as well. So this is about not only having a call come into a company that's not answered by an agent, because the IVR can punch out a message to you that allows you to self-serve in a really customer-friendly way. This is also about how do you have somebody come into your company or your agency and process that call quickly and send branded content that's highly relevant to the user that closes the call and gives that customer a reference point later on as well.
Excellent. Okay, good stuff. And then can you talk a little bit about, maybe just last question, Tony, for you, is some of the technologies that we work with at Whisper when we talk about call centers? Obviously, there's a myriad of technologies out there, just a flavor of some of the ones that we've dealt with in the past.
There's a lot, too many to mention, of course. When you talk about an environment where whatever has an API, that's kind of the limits of what we do. I'll just pick on the top left there, the Amazon Connect or AWS Connect environment. We do a lot of work with Queensland Health. I mentioned some of the COVID references earlier. So we did nearly all of the COVID comms for Queensland Health when COVID was around. And Queensland Health is the key agency for the state of Queensland that has about 4 million people. So Queensland Health they've got a contact center, and they have this ecosystem of Splunk, AWS Connect, ServiceNow, and Whisper. That's this really tight, one of their really tight environments that they manage. And they've got this wonderful, and I think that this is such a clever thing. A lot of the people that start in Queensland Health start in this contact center, and then they move on into another area. But there's an ongoing relationship with that agent that used to be there to where they've moved on to. So when they've got calls coming in and they start to get a bit busy, they've got everybody's contact details in ServiceNow. When we have a direct plugin for ServiceNow, by the way. So your contacts are housed there. Splunk is managing the call queues. Splunk would then say, well, the call queues are getting a bit high. We're going to send a Whisper message out to this group of 50 people. Because we want them to join our queue for the next 40 minutes. So Whisper would punch out a message. They've got a soft phone on their laptop, so if they didn't, they can still be staged in 4 to 5 minutes. And all of these agents that used to work there can come into the queue automatically, manage calls for, whatever it might be. And I think I did get a stat from them. They were saying that about 5 agents can drop the wait time of a call by 20 minutes. So just a few people have a material impact on that experience in calling in. Then, of course, once the queue is managed, those people drop off and they receive a message automatically from Whisper saying, hey, David, thanks for jumping into our queue and helping us out. Maybe there would be a quick 15-second survey of what the experience was, and then they go back to their normal job. So they had the opportunity, David, of buying more people, hiring more people, getting more infrastructure, but they looked at it in a completely different way of this resource that was still there, but it was just not being tapped into anymore. And they developed this fully automated process with Splunk, ServiceNow, AWS Connect, and Whisper. So that's just one of the, I suppose, examples where we integrate into other environments. I should also know we've got a direct plugin with the AWS Connect by way of managing those call queues and the automated IVR deflection as well.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, listen, thank you, Tony, for your time. Some great use cases there. I think we certainly stepped through, like I said at the beginning, on top of everyone's mind is the ability to, how do we drive costs down in this environment while keeping customer satisfaction at, or even be able to improve it. And certainly call deflection is one of those areas. I think the key takeaway for me as well is this doesn't have to be a huge lift or a huge expense for an organization as well. This is something that can be done in a seamless way, as you said, with drag and drop technology that doesn't require a huge amount of IT lift on the client side. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it, and we'll wrap it up. And if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll deal with them now. And if not, we appreciate your time, and we'll speak soon. Thanks, everyone.